What's up guys, Cash back once again, and we got the new roadmap right around the corner, and of course we're hoping to see a bunch of new content and heroes come to the game, but there's still the question of whether or not we'll ever see a return from MODOK, and that's what we're discussing today. But right before we jump into that, I wanted to remind you guys that you can get all your Avengers and superhero merch over at Fan Dominion at a great price, and if you use my promo code you can get an additional 10% off your purchase, and you can find the link down in the description. But with that said, let's jump into it. So back in January, during one of his streams over on Twitch, Brian Wagner, who's a developer working on Avengers, was asked about the possibility of seeing MODOK or Crossbones arrive as new villain sectors, and he answered that the reason we don't currently have those villain sectors in the game is because their combat mechanics were specifically built for those encounters and the story missions, and they aren't extensive enough for a villain sector as is. Now when players heard this, they were understandably pissed because essentially he admitted that neither of those villains were planned to be anything more than story bosses, unlike Taskmaster and Abomination. But Brian also clarified that his comments didn't mean they will never be villain sectors, but were simply an explanation as to why they aren't so far. I think because of the direction they wanted to go narrative wise, they chose to leave MODOK's return in the air to focus on the rise of Monica as the Scientist Supreme, and because they have limited resources, they don't have the ability to convert his boss mechanics into something more suited for a villain sector on top of developing new content and biomes for future DLC. So I do think they have plans to give MODOK his own villain sector, they just have to make it fall in line with the game's current narrative, and I think Brian's answer was more so predicated on giving players insight into the development side of things, because it seems simple on paper to just drop those villains into other missions, but if you notice, there are a lot more cinematic interactions during boss fights in the story than in the villain sector, so they definitely would need to make changes for him to take on 4 heroes at once, but that's what we're looking forward to, because we have 4 new heroes who never got to fight MODOK, and this would definitely serve as welcome new content. It's not going to be the thing that saves the game, but a new villain to fight that has different phases and mechanics would be a breath of fresh air compared to the chore of fighting AIM mechs and Maestro over and over again. Personally, I would want to see a MODOK Omega level threat style mission because I think he deserves a bit more than a simple villain sector, because he was the biggest threat in the campaign, and that would give us a chance to play through a hopefully better designed OLT with a bigger hero roster. I don't believe they never plan to reintroduce Crossbones as a villain sector, he just wasn't a part of their current narrative plans, and I think it's more likely we'll see him return around the time we get to the Winter Soldier if they want to introduce Hydra as a new enemy faction. I'm still not sold on the idea that they'll do a big Hydra introduction during Winter Soldier's operation, but I could see Crossbones playing a bigger role in the Winter Soldier story versus what we saw of him in the War for Wakanda where he was simply a hired gun. Most of the current dev team working on Avengers was not there during the game's inception, so they're stuck fixing the mistakes of their original dev's short-sighted decisions, so a lot of the small changes that we're seeing come to the game now that should have been there from the start are because the current devs actually get it, but they don't have the luxury of resources that the original team was afforded, but they're trying, so I won't kill them for being honest about something that isn't their fault. Hopefully this isn't something that's repeated in the long term, and they understand that you can't just introduce a villain in campaign with no plans to add them as in-game content as soon as possible, because players are starving for fun content they want to play again and again. But those are my thoughts on the situation. What are you guys thinking? Do you believe we'll see MODOK or Crossbones as villain sectors in the future, or do you think the ship has sailed? Let me know down below, and make sure to drop a like to support the channel and subscribe to catch new Marvel's Avengers content every week. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.